Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sarah Allen, and welcome to A Little Bit of Magic. And today's episode features a very notable person that I would like to introduce you to. And I hope I don't screw this introduction up, but just John DeDakis. He is prolific, iconic, legendary. He carries a 45-year career in journalism.
He's old.
You're getting younger. You didn't stop there. I read that you were a CNN senior editor for the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, and also had a stint as a White House correspondent.
Right.
And then you didn't stop. You kept writing, and you became a novelist and have published a whole series of six books, 6 novels, mystery, suspense, thrillers.
That's right.
You are a teacher, one-on-one coach. You are a podcaster, a public speaker. You teach all around the country at writers' conferences. Am I forgetting anything?
I think you've pretty much got it. Yeah, I'm getting tired just listening.
So part of my show also features, and one thing I want to mention that is important to this show is that my show deals with unexpected connections, healing, and inspiration. And you also teach healing via writing. And so we're going to get into that too. That's very
Excellent.
exciting.
Oh, that's a stub close to my heart.
Yes, I understand that. And also, people are probably wondering, how do I know this famous man?
Yeah,
And,
John who?
and we go way back, John. I don't know if you remember the year, but it was 2008 in Madison, Wisconsin. And I was at a writers' conference because I also share your passion for writing. And I was trying to get into the industry and learn more about publishing. And you were very kind to me. And I believe you were teaching and presenting. And we have remained in contact ever since. And recently you have helped me with my own editing of my book proposal and have done one-on-one coaching with me. And you also lived on the same street as my uncle, or you grew up on the same street on Madison. Can I say that out loud? You in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
La Crosse, Wisconsin, Madison Street. Yeah.
So it's a very small world.
Well,
And now
you still have the Wisconsin accent.
it will never die.
Right.
Someone told me it's the language of God.
This is true.
So are you in Baltimore? We haven't seen each other physically since 2008, but we remain in contact. Are you in Baltimore?
I'm in Baltimore and you're in Oregon.
I'm in Bend, Oregon today. Yes. And that's where I live.
A moving target's harder to hit. You're on the road a lot.
I am on the road, preferably. So tell me about your most recent novels, your most recent novel, Enemies Domestic, and why you think it's so timely.
Whoa. Well, Enemies Domestic is a political thriller. I write in the voice of a 20-something young woman. If you want to go there, we can go there.
We'll talk about that.
She is White House press secretary. It's her first day on the job. She's pregnant, but she's ambivalent about becoming a single mom. The dad died of a heroin overdose.
Wow.
And so she's grieving that. And so the first question that she's asked comes from a Tucker Carlson type who asks, are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child? And so that intrusive question happens in a post Roe v. Wade era where abortion is a crime in many states.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, in Enemies Domestic, a dictator becomes president. And it was, interestingly, it was published July 4th, 2024, the same week the Supreme Court ruled that presidents have absolute immunity from prosecution for crimes they commit as part of their official duties. They haven't defined what official duties are. And so I wrote it as in hopes of it becoming a cautionary tale. And instead, we are now living in the transition between democracy and authoritarianism.
Oh, most definitely. Well, thank you. I hope this resonates with people in that respect to show us what's happening right now. So you were also a journalist for 45 years. And you were, for 7 years, you were with Wolf Blitzer. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. The last 7 years, I was at CNN 25 years, and the last 7 was with Wolf.
Oh, how amazing. What How do you think journalism has changed? I mean, you've seen half a century. You were ingrained for
You're
half a
making
century.
me feel so old, Sarah.
You're just warming up, John,
Okay.
obviously.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how has journalism changed or how has it evolved?
Oh man, it's changed a lot. And part of the changes have to do with technology. I mean, that has always helped. I don't know if help is the right word, but technological advances have caused journalism to change over the last 150 years. And we are now at a point where, I mean, when I started my career, broadcast journalism was television journalism was film. And,
Mhm.
that meant that if you were doing a story, you had to get your film in the soup, in the developer, like 2 or 3 hours before airtime. Now, it's live and it's digital and it's immediate. And in addition, everybody's got a cell phone, and cell
Mhm.
phones have, video capabilities that are air quality. And so we've now gotten to the point where influencers, people with no editorial, no editor sitting on their shoulder going, "Where'd you get that? How do you know it's true?"
Mhm.
are are projecting things into the ozone, and they have, hundreds of thousands of followers. And so really now journalism has changed so that it's the zone is flooded with all kinds of information, some of it valid, some of it reliable, much of it conspiracy theories and just unchecked information.
If you were a young man today, would you still go into the field knowing that it's changed?
Probably just because that's where my sweet spot is. I mean,
Mhm.
I was a political science minor, a journalism major, and so I've always been interested in public policy. Um, so yeah, I think I probably would, but I don't miss it.
Really?
Yeah,
If Do you prefer being a novelist?
I do because I get to write in my jammies,
That's great. And I
and
do
I
you feel
and
that
and I get to make it up.
do you feel that because of your years as a journalist, has that helped you become a novelist?
Definitely, because um, a lot of the skill sets are the same. Writing and writing tight and being succinct and clear. That's the essence of journalism, and it makes for, I think, good storytelling.
Mhm.
Because even if you've written an 80,000 word book, it's each sentence still needs to be efficiently constructed.
Okay. And how did you transition from journalism to becoming a novelist?
Well, it happened while I was at CNN. They made me an editor. I had been a reporter and then a writer,
Mhm.
but editing was tedious. It was fault finding, but it paid well. And
Uh-huh.
so I needed a creative outlet. And I tried writing a biography of a friend of mine who was murdered, and that was time consuming and fraught because I was traveling, but I was also, we had 3 little kids, a mortgage, a wife,
Oh.
you know, and a day job. And so that was just too much. And my wife suggested that I fictionalize a lot of my research. I
Mhm.
didn't fictionalize a lot of it, but that enabled me to make the transition and to create a story that, um, you know, became Fast Track, which is my first novel.
Oh, great. So you were when you wrote that novel, you were also working as a journalist?
Well, I was, this started in 1994, and it took me 10 years to get the agent that I've got. And so, while I had the day job working overnights,
Mhm.
I was also working on the novel, and I didn't leave CNN until novel number 3, Troubled Water, came.
And you had 3 kids
Yeah.
and a wife. How did you do that? Seriously.
Well,
I
not
have trouble
well.
just taking care of myself and
I know, and this is a cautionary tale because I was working hard on the book, and my wife took me aside and she said, "Your book is your mistress," and that got my attention.
Yeah.
And so, because the balance is hard to maintain, and I think that you know if if anyone who is married is honest, they'll tell you that there comes a time when the bloom is off the rose.
Hmm.
And that is when marriages are at risk.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've written a memoir, it's not published yet, but I go into, the fraught dynamics
Hmm.
of marital strife. Cindy and I are still married. We've been married 47 years,
Well,
but there was a bump. There
congratulations.
were a couple of bumps in the road there,
Hmm.
and we worked it through. But the question, how did you do it?
No
It takes
sleep?
well,
Did you not sleep much?
well, no, of course not. Sleep deprivation was a major problem. But I mean, we worked it through, and I think good communication skills have a lot to do with it.
Can I go backwards to journalism for
You
a
can
second?
go wherever you want to go.
I'm dying to know this because I read that you have interviewed Jimmy Carter, I mean, very notable people like Jimmy Carter,
Right?
Ronald Reagan,
Yep.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yep.
Am I correct?
Yep.
So you've had so many rich experiences as a journalist, and it's probably hard to choose just one. But can you share one of your most memorable or powerful experiences that?
This might surprise you, but sure, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Alfred Hitchcock, those were all memorable and significant interviews. But as you probably know, I am voraciously curious. And usually the most interesting interview is the person I've just talked to.
Oh, okay. Well, don't tell Jimmy Carter that. Well, he's you can't tell
Well,
him that
I
anymore.
can't tell. He already knows that. But it's true because everybody has a story. I think everybody is interesting. And so, it need not just be, the famous or well-known people.
How did you get into journalism?
That took place over time because I was originally going to go into law. My dad was a lawyer. He and I were going to go into practice together.
Oh, really?
And then I was going to use the
And you grew
law.
up in La Crosse, correct?
Grew up in La
La
Crosse.
Crosse,
My dad,
Wisconsin.
my dad had his office was, on the third floor of the Rivoli building, right above the Marquee,
Oh, really?
4th Street. You know right where that
Yeah,
is.
The Rivoli Theater is still going. Do
It's
you know that?
still there,
Hmm.
yeah.
It's still
And
operating.
so I clerked for him for a couple of summers, and it was kind of boring because he mostly did probate and wills and that kind of stuff, and it wasn't that interesting. Um, and when I was a student at the University of Wisconsin, this was in the late 60s when the Vietnam War was a big deal. And when I was going to class, I was bombarded from both the left and the right to take a position for or against the war. And what I noticed was that everybody was spinning.
Hmm.
I just instinctively knew they were leaving out salient details that would undermine their position. And so I joined a campus radio station because I felt journalism was the perch to
What
sit
was
on.
it? 88.9 WLSU? No.
Well, that was in La Crosse. That was in La
Oh, okay.
Crosse. That came later. This was a student radio station that's not even in existence anymore. It was
Okay.
WSRM in Madison in
Okay.
Og Hall. Og Hall
Oh,
doesn't.
wow. I lived
It
in
was.
On Call.
Did you really?
Yes.
Yeah, it was right by Gordon
7th
Collins.
floors.
I lived in Celery Hall. And that was about the extent of you know, the signal. I mean, we were closed circuit, so you
Hmm.
could only hear us in the southeast storms. But I covered the riots, the anti-war riots after Kent State
Oh,
in
how fascinating.
1970, and I
Hmm.
got tear gassed.
Oh,
And
really?
and the station I worked with was, they put the report, made it available to other radio stations in Wisconsin. My parents heard me getting tear gassed on the radio and
Oh,
suggested that I switch schools, which I did. And all of this to say, how did I go into journalism? It was first as a volunteer covering, important stories that were of interest to me, and so that's how it happened. And uh, a couple of quick anecdotes that go along with that. Playboy magazine voted UW-Madison the #1 party school in the country,
yes.
and I felt that it was my responsibility to be the #1 party. Or I didn't succeed, And I was so good at it that my grade point average was 1.95.
Oh, well.
So yeah, I'm not a doctorate like you. I don't know what it's like to be smart. So when I transferred from the University of Wisconsin in Madison to La Crosse, I lost 20 credits in the transfer and my student deferment. They had a draft lottery, and if you had a number below 150, you were going to go to Vietnam.
Okay. Oh.
My number was 14.
Oh my goodness.
So I got orders to Vietnam, but
Hmm.
the last at 2 weeks before I was to ship out, my orders were changed to Germany, and I spent 2.5 years at the headquarters of the American Forces Radio and Television Network in Frankfurt, Germany,
Oh, you're
doing
kidding.
doing interviews for a special events radio unit. And the first interview was with Alfred Hitchcock, and
Really?
that was when I made the transition to journalism.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Life doesn't turn out the way you expect.
No, it doesn't, right? It's interesting how you make one decision and it can lead you down a completely different path.
And that's all of us. I mean,
Hmm.
life is cause and effect, and so is writing, so is storytelling.
Right, right. Um, so getting back to writing now, you have written 5 other novels in the Lark Chadwick series.
Sure.
Um, Fast Track, Bluff, Troubled Water, Bullet in the Chamber, and Fake. Tell us about those. And does the person I've read Bluff. That's the book I've read because I love Granddad.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I chose that one. Granddad's Bluff is in La Crosse, Wisconsin. If you don't know, it's a really beautiful place. But tell us about those, and if you have to read them in order. I did.
You don't have to read them in
Okay.
order. They stand alone, but a lot of people do like to start at the beginning, but you can start anywhere and you haven't really missed. You know you have missed something, but I haven't really given away too much. So the incentive is to go back and go, "Oh, how did that happen?" So Fast Track and Bluff are set in southern Wisconsin. Fast Track, my protagonist, her quick backstory is that she's an English major at the University of Wisconsin and is sexually assaulted and drops out because of that trauma. And while she's a waitress, I guess they call them servers now, she writes the great American novel that keeps getting rejected. So the story begins when she discovers the body of the aunt who raised her from infancy, because Lark was orphaned uh, when she was an infant when her parents were killed in a car accident. And so, long story short, she goes back to the small town where the accident happened. It's Stoughton, Wisconsin, but I changed the name because I had to change some of the
Mhm.
topography. So she gets a newspaper clipping and discovers she's the miracle baby who survived a car train collision. And so she convinces the newspaper editor, former New York Times editor, Pulitzer Prize winner, convinces him to let her do a follow up story on the accident. Two of her sources are the mayor and the sheriff. They're running against each other for Congress. The election is 1 week away, and each guy has a secret that will unravel the mystery. And
Mm.
that gets Lark started in a journalism career with Lionel Stone as her mentor.
Right.
In book two, Bluff, she helps Lionel solve the mystery surrounding his daughter's death
Mhm.
along the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. I hiked the trail to do the research.
Oh, cool.
And so Bluff is sort of a double meaning because there's Machu Picchu in there, but there's
Mhm.
also Granddad's.
Mhm.
And then Troubled Water, Lark is a cops and courts reporter at a small daily paper in southern Georgia, and she solves a serial killer case. That gets her. She falls in love with the chief photographer. They both end up getting reassigned to covering the White House, where she is White House correspondent for the Associated Press in Bullet in the Chamber. That let's see, the subplot, and we may want to get into this. The subplot surrounds the heroin overdose that killed my youngest son in 2011, and I used his story as a subplot in Bullet in the Chamber. And then Lark is White House correspondent in that, and in Fake, which is book five, in which she is the victim of fake news. And then she leaves the Associated Press And in Enemies Domestic, the most recent one, she is White House press secretary, and I mentioned what that storyline is.
Wow. Very rich.
It's a lot going on.
There's a lot
She's
going
a
on.
fascinating person.
And you've incorporated so much of your own personal experience,
Yes,
have you?
except for the being pregnant part.
Is it difficult to write as a woman?
It's not as hard as I thought it would be. And the reason I started writing as a woman was not in any calculated way. It was when I first started writing my series, someone suggested that I should write in a way that stretches who I am. Never been a woman, so I gave it a try, and I made a couple of interesting discoveries. One, emotions are not gender specific. We
Mhm.
all have the exact same emotions. It's just that the women in my life are more willing to share their emotions, and they're more articulate about them when they do share them. And while I was writing it, I was at CNN surrounded by mostly 20 something young women who would tell me their stories about their
Mhm.
job, their career, their families, their romances. And so I would listen, and you hear their voices, and they would tell me what it's like to be a woman because I'd ask. And there was I remember there was one woman, beautiful, and I remember asking her, what's it like for guys to come on to you all the time? And she said, and this was a real eye opener. She said, I can tell in the first 20 seconds if I'm safe. I never have to worry
Mm.
about being safe. And that's when I realized that being a woman is playing defense.
Mhm.
And so that was just one, and I mean, you get that, right? I
Ye
mean, it's that's the way it is. And I
Mhm.
never knew that. And so a lot of these women became beta readers. They would read early drafts and let me know what I'm getting right and what I'm getting wrong.
Have you learned has it being that perspective over and over, you really start to be part of that I mean, the character kind of almost becomes you, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I think
Because you're
it's
so involved.
given me empathy, I think. I mean, I'm much more aware now
Mhm.
of, being like, this is a simple thing. I'm going for a walk, and there's a woman ahead of me, maybe 20 feet. I need to be aware that I need to make sure that she knows I'm not a threat. And
Mhm.
so often I will divert and get into the street so that there's a little more daylight, because I've been told by women that whenever if they're in, like an elevator or a more confined space, they're looking for, how am I going to get out of this if I have to?
And has it taught you more about men or maybe the mistakes they make with women?
Oh, baby. Yes. Um, because a lot of women have told me that, the mistake there was one woman who took one of my writing classes, and she was writing a book on like 100 first dates, and it was on a dating app kind of thing. And I asked her, I said, what is there a pattern here? She said, men do not know how to have a conversation, hold a conversation with a woman.
Hmm,
I mean, on some of these dates, it's all about them. It's all
that's so
about
true. That's so true.
it's all about how much money they're making and the high powered job they've got and blah, blah, blah. I mean, one woman told me that she was on a date and the guy ordered for her and tried to feed her, and I mean, just guys are clueless. It's not about you. It should be about the woman.
Right.
And
Advice, John, good advice.
thank you. I mean, and
Listen
you
to
know,
this man.
And then the other thing that happens is, let's say the first date goes great, um, then the guy gets needy,
Mm,
and he's like, throws all kinds of expensive gifts, and why don't you text me back right away? And neediness is not attractive. It's a turnoff. What's attractive is confidence. And that's why the bad boys always seem to be the ones that get the woman. And yet bad boys are mean, and
yeah.
they abuse either
Mhm.
physically or emotionally. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll shut up, because there was one woman I worked with at CNN. another very attractive woman, and she told me she was getting a divorce. And she made an offhand comment. She said, "I always seem to fall for the bad boys." And I asked her, "Why is that?" And she was stunned. She'd never been asked that question before. And she thought about it and she said, and this was really eye opening for me. She said, "They seem to be the only ones with the confidence to approach me."
Huh.
And she wasn't being conceited, she was just being matter of fact. And it's the confidence factor,
Right.
and if
I
you
think you're
can,
right.
and so if you're a guy, if you can convey confidence
And
without
be
being mean
uh-huh.
or a player or whatever, and really putting the woman on the pedestal, not in a way that is worshipful, but is just treating her like a person,
Mhm.
not how she looks, nothing like that. An attractive woman is praised all the time for how she looks, and it's boring. What she would prefer is, teasing, playfulness, bantering, that kind of stuff. You are nodding. Am I making sense?
Yes, I think you should maybe you should start a new podcast about this.
Well, let
Seriously.
me just turn it around quickly. Is what is it? Why are you nodding? Why are you agreeing?
Because that's so true. I mean, it's personally, I fall for bad guys, and I like confident guys. And
Okay,
nice guys, they're too nice, and yeah, they don't have the confidence. I think she hit it spot on. I never really understood that, but and they're more exciting and,
I
often
rest my
more
case.
fun.
And you
Yeah,
you and I've never had this
adventure.
conversation, right? Am I right? We haven't
Right,
talked
and I
about
think
this.
men need to be trained.
Yes, yes,
And
and I'm
there are a lot of nice guys out there, I believe, I hope.
yeah, and I mean, my wife, bless her heart, um, she did have to train me, um, and this had to do more with parenting because women test their men, I'm told,
Uh-huh.
and one of the tests, and I didn't realize it at the time, she said, "How do you feel about being a dad?" And my answer was, "Yeah." And she had a follow-up. Her follow-up, because that's not a real ringing endorsement for fatherhood. And her follow up question was, "Well, are you willing to be a dad?" And I went, "Yeah," which is still kind of eh. And she said, "If I could get you to willing, I could get you the rest of the way." So I've learned a lot about parenting.
And how old were
Because
you there? I think age has a factor as well. How
I
old?
was 27,
Okay.
old enough to know better.
Part of that
But
brain, I don't think develops till like 28.
well, we didn't, yeah, I was 28 when we got married. She was still 27,
Mhm.
but we both had good parenting models. So that helped.
Mhm. That's good. And you're from the Midwest. Midwestern people are shout out to
Exactly.
the nice people in Midwest. Um, going back to and I am so sorry about you'd mentioned that your son suffered an overdose when he was 22 of
22, yeah,
heroin
way too young.
and Bullet in the Chamber, um, or that inspired you to write Bullet in the Chamber. Can you talk I mean, it must have been what prompted you to write from such a painful personal
Ooh,
place, and
that's a
how did that
that's a
help you heal?
that's a really good question. I kind of stumbled into it because my sister took her life in 1980, and Fast Track is the very first chapter of Fast Track is the scene in which I was on the scene when not when she killed herself, but shortly thereafter.
I'm
And
so
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 chapter one
sorry.
is ripped from reality. And I
Wow.
think that I just started writing that way because it was a catharsis,
Mhm.
and as it's turned out, I've found when my sister died, um, somebody suggested that he said move toward the pain. I had no idea what he meant,
Mhm.
but I did, and so then when Stephen died, I did that. I definitely moved toward the pain. And I think that that's one of the things I've discovered in being a writing coach and teacher is that a lot of people have pain, dysfunction, abuse, whatever. And I think that that makes for the most authentic writing because you're pulling from a place of personal pain. Mind that pain because pain is universal. We all have experienced not just the loss of a loved one, but pets, you know,
Relationship.
jobs, relationships, health, innocence, all of that produces grief. And so if you can move toward the pain and mine it, your writing will not only resonate with other people, but I think it will, to a certain extent, enhance emotional healing. Because one of the things I teach my students is the better you know yourself as a person, the better your writing will be. Because good writing includes the whole person,
Mhm.
psychology, emotions, experiences, all of it.
And writing helps you get to know yourself, I think, too, correct? I mean, it
That's
it brings out the real person in you.
that's right.
Mhm. And you mentioned that you teach how to heal via writing. Do you have classes, or how could if someone wanted to work with you, how
I, I I
how do you
love
teach
this.
it?
You're just asking all the right questions, Sarah. You can reach me through my website, which is my
Okay.
name.com, JOHN, D as in dog, ED as in dog, AKIS as in Sam.com.
It's not
And
the
that, that-
DeDakis, not DeDakis, DeDakis.
that's right. That's okay. I know who I am. And I do one-on-one coaching. I teach a lot of different classes online and at writing conferences. And I teach a lot of different classes: how to write a novel, how to write a thriller, how to write a memoir. And I also I teach how to face your writing fears and
Mhm.
how to heal from grief.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, and when I was gonna ask too about just writing in general, what is your practice for writing? Um, it's such a solitary I mean, it's been a struggle. I used to be kind of addicted to writing, and I had to stop because I became so isolated, and I wanted to isolate myself.
Well, you're an extrovert though too, aren't you?
I've kind of an extrovert introvert, but
You're an ambivert then,
I'm
huh?
an ambivert.
All
And
right.
when I lived in Colombia, South America, I had a Fulbright, and I was very isolated there. But it was such a rich cultural experience, and it was a difficult experience at first. So I just threw myself into writing, and I would go to the internet cafe and put the black curtains around me, and I'd sit in this little box, and I could write up to 8 or sometimes 12 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And I would send these emails home to people, and they loved them, and I created stories with them, and I fell so in love with writing. But what I think was really difficult is when it starts time to edit and trying to get it to publish. It was different just to send an email out, but versus publishing. But it after that, it started to take a toll after writing too much, and I had to stop because it became an addiction.
Ooh, yeah,
Where it
interesting.
became an unhealthy, where I didn't want to interact anymore with the outside world. I wanted to stay in the writer's world.
So
My dad has suffered.
how did you get unstuck?
Well, I kinda had I mean, this is personal, but I sorta had a little bit of a nervous breakdown. Like, I was back in Milwaukee, maybe because I wasn't living in Columbia, because Columbia was so rich, it pulled me there where I lived in Barranquilla, Colombia, there was dancing all hours of the day, 12 different kinds of music, there was constant partying, and so I had a healthy dose. They were not gonna let you be isolated there. But in La Crosse, there I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was dark, it was cold, it was winter, I didn't have the rich culture anymore, and then I was really trying to start to get into publish or to publish my work, so I was editing,
Mm.
and I remember I was really taking it to an extreme level, like I know, Scott Fitzgerald and who wrote Fear of Loathing in Las Vegas?
Oh man, I'm not
That novel, he would actually try to emulate his writing by copying it on a do you know that he would type
right.
F. Scott Fitzgerald's work, and The Great Gatsby, and he would type out the novel, and I started doing that because I was gonna write for magazines, and I was trying to kinda change my style of writing, and then I saw, like, John Steinbeck look in the back of a novel, and I was eating a grapefruit in the breakfast, and I thought and he started, like, talking, and John Steinbeck was not really talking. I was really starting to go nuts, and I
Mm.
understand how writers can lose their minds. Like, I don't think they started
Oh
off
goodness.
as mentally ill or suicidal or, necessarily becoming alcoholics or drug addicts. I think sometimes the art, if they become too passionate, can
Wow.
pull you so far into the other side where you can't get out.
I need to interview you on my podcast, ma'am.
I had to stop for 10 years. I mean, I had a breaking point. I talked to my dad. My father, even though he's a dairy farmer in Minnesota, he is a haiku poet, and he would write for hours at a time, and he would take prose and condense it, and he would spend months condensing this prose into just 3 lines. And so he said he had the same thing, that he had the same problem. He couldn't get out of he told me, "You have to stop. It's like, we can't it's like an addiction for us. It's not healthy." So I stopped for
Was it his influence that caused you to kind of go, "Whoa, wait a minute"?
well, it was nice to have someone to talk to and that understood me because he went through the same thing. Like, I didn't even wanna look in the mirror at myself. I didn't want anyone to call me. I was writing. I could write for 3 days and not stop, and then I looked at around, like, created this mess in my house. Like, I didn't even remember what happened. So it was, and then once I stopped writing, and then I went to Brazil and lived, and I taught, and I got really into living again, and I'm such an adventurous, and I am an extrovert, so it felt good not to write. Like, I just wanted to be living, and so to find that, I guess my question is, how do you find balance? My dad always gave me a good advice. He said, "You don't let writing is part of you. Don't let it become don't become part of it."
Ooh, boy, that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And I think it's trial and error. Finding the balance is trial and error, I think. And what you've talked about, I haven't experienced. If anything, I've got procrastination nailed. And yet I've discovered that when I've first got published, they never tell you this, that, even if you get a book contract at Random House or someplace like that, you're going to have to do the marketing. And so I found that marketing was a real rabbit hole, a real time suck. And I liked doing it because it's not selling, it's just telling. And you're just finding different people to tell that you've written a novel.
So you have to
And
do your own marketing?
you have to do your own marketing, pretty much. I mean, they'll
Wow.
do a couple of things, but
Mhm.
the success or failure is pretty much up to you. And so it's always a matter of finding new ways and new avenues to let people know that you've written a book. And that can become very time consuming. And I think it helps that Cindy, my wife, is a good equalizer. She's a fascinating person. And when COVID hit, this was a time when everybody was inside. And
Mhm.
a lot of married people discovered they don't really like each other. And Cindy and I found that we actually do.
Aw.
And my process is I get up early because I worked overnights at CNN for 20 to 25 years. My body is bludgeoned into submission. I only need 5 hours a night. So I'm up pre-dawn. Sometimes, like today, I was up at 2 in the morning.
Wow.
That was still 5 hours of sleep. So I'm down here, and it's quiet. I can do whatever I need to do, and writing is sometimes part of it. And then at 8, Cindy, calls me, or texts me, is it time for coffee? And so I'll bring coffee up, and the next 4 hours I'm hanging out with her. And, we're doing puzzles, we're reading Heather Cox Richardson, we're reading the New York Times, we're talking. She's one of my alpha readers for Enemies Domestic. Every chapter I wrote, she read and gave me feedback.
Oh, that's
And
great.
that's the way it is for book 7 that I'm working on now. And so she is a great stabilizing influence because
Mhm.
she's vastly interested in the world around her and she brings a lot of beauty into my life that I wouldn't be aware of because she's a musician. So
Wonderful.
our backgrounds are different.
Mhm.
And so that brings a lot of stability. And then I'll come back down here, I'll go for a walk, come back down here and work. And then at 7, we'll eat together and we'll watch something on TV. So, half my day is with her, half is with my creative side.
I think that helps that you have a partner, so it keeps you balanced,
Right.
right? It forces you. It doesn't allow
Yes.
you. If you didn't have her, it would be more difficult. Sure.
Yeah, I think so, but I'm enough of an extrovert that I would probably reach out, and make time, to
Mhm.
get together with other people because I still do that, but um I don't need to do that as much as I would if I were, alone.
And I think age and experience, you were already a seasoned journalist and you had so many years in the writing field. For me, I had a little bit of experience in journalism at the beginning of in early 20s, but I didn't continue with it. So it was just a new foray, and I just threw myself into it. So I think that's something else. You bring wisdom and experience and age to it where you
There you go, talking about how old I am again.
no, but it's true. Because I realize as I've gotten older now, I wouldn't let myself do what I did. Like I tried to quit my job as a teacher and just write, and that was the biggest mistake ever. You never quit your day job. I thought that was, you need that balance and you need the other aspects of your life. Otherwise, it's just everything.
That's right.
It destroys your writing eventually.
It really does. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and the publishing industry. Oh, so you do most of your writing in the morning, early hours.
I do. That's when the creative side is. And then if I'm editing somebody's manuscript, I'll do that in the afternoon.
Okay. And how would you advise someone that just wants to get into writing? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I think that, I mean, part
I
of
think
it
a lot of
really,
people want to write a book and they don't know where to start.
they don't. And I think, though, that part of it is if the desire to write is there, if you've got that story that's been nagging at you, then take heart, because that's an indicator that you're going to probably be able to do it, because it won't let you go. And I'll say a couple of things. One is uh, at the root of writer's block is fear. The
Mm.
fear of not being perfect, of
Wanted to
making a
ask you about that.
mistake, and so my suggestion is, if you've got a story, just start writing it. If you're writing a memoir, just start getting the details of your life down, and don't worry about if it's perfect or not. And if you're because when a person starts writing a novel, they sit down and they go, should it be first person? Should it be third person? And right away they freeze up. My suggestion is write it in first person, because that's how you communicate. That's your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And if the story needs to be told a different way, you've got this steaming pile of words that you will then mold into a better story. But the hardest part is that blank screen. And if you can just start writing and keep it moving forward without worrying about it being perfect, turn off your internal editor, your mom on your shoulder going, you can't say that. Zip it, mom. Just write.
Right. And then have you suffered from writer's block?
Once. And that was when I was a journalist. I was working at WTSO radio in Madison, Wisconsin. It's a country music station, but they had a good news department. And I had to do an hourly newscast, 5 minutes, not a big deal. And it was like, I was just, and so I went, it was in the middle of the night. And the station was in a cornfield. And I went out and this is a true story. I got down on my knees and I prayed, Lord, help me to be able to write well and fast. And even my prayer needed editing, because
How old are you with this?
I was probably 20, 25, I think, and I wasn't trying to tell God, right away answer. I want to be able to write fast. And so even my prayer needed editing, but I got up, went back into the building, and I never had writer's block again. Just
Oh,
started to write.
wow. That's cool. It's sorry. I
Prayer works.
Yeah, it does. Um, I worked in a country radio station when I was 16. I think I was 16 or 15. 16, I think. I worked at KQ Hot Country 98, and I was an announcer in Spring Grove, Minnesota, and it was in a farm field like that, and I would be on there till 10 or 11 at night, and I'd have to shut down that station alone, and guys would call up, and they thought I was older.
Hey, baby. Yeah.
Yes, proposing marriage. I mean, they were probably 50 years old, and it was terrifying, but, back then, I don't even believe my parents might, they let me do it, but, the world has changed so much, but back then it was
A little naive back in the day.
in Minnesota. Um, so also going back to people wanting to get published,
Yeah.
now self-publishing, anyone can publish. You've traditionally published all of your work. What do you think about the publishing industry and how it's changed? It's
It's
changed, and
it's
also we should talk about AI. That's another whole topic.
okay. Well, first things first.
Yeah.
Traditional publishing, I still recommend that,
Uh-huh.
because that brings your writing to a professional level.
Mhm.
Because so much of the self-published stuff is schlock,
Yeah.
because they haven't really run it past an editor. They've been impatient to get their book into print. They upload it. It sucks. It's riddled with typos. The story is flabby, but it's out there.
Mhm.
And so I recommend that people, try the traditional route, but self-publishing, there's no shame in self-publishing. There's
Right.
hybrid publishers where, they'll offer packages. So,
Mhm.
the minimum is, they'll code it for you so that you can upload it. They'll format it. But if you want editorial oversight, they'll provide that. If you want your book cover designed, they'll do that. If you want it marketed, they'll do that. But you're paying more and more, so you may be paying up to $6,000, and that means you got to make your money back to sell it. But there are, if you want to get published, you can get published one way or the other.
Really? You can tell. I can tell if something's self-published. Generally, you can tell the difference. You can see the difference. Right.
In what way? How can you tell?
You can I was in New Orleans recently and there was a man selling his book about growing up in the urban areas of New Orleans. And I picked up his book and I just was leafing through it and reading, and I could tell right away that it was self-published.
In what way? What was it that
Um,
did off?
the presentation, for one thing, it just looked like it was just bound and printed and bound and sold. Also, just the diction and the way it was written didn't seem high quality. I could tell the way he presented it also, didn't sell me. It just didn't seem that he had put the work into it based on when I was speaking to him as an author and reading to it. It just, yeah, like loose, floppy, unfinished.
Well, okay. Again, you've made my point.
Okay, let's talk about AI.
All right. Got a question there?
I just think I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, I believe. I feel like it could be such a tool. At the same time, I feel like it could maybe destroy the arts as a whole.
Oh man, how much time do we have? Um, my opinion of AI has been evolving, and it's still a work in progress. And it's coming up more and more at writers' conferences where there are panels discussing this. And I was at one panel where this guy said, "Well, I don't want a toaster to write my book," which is a great line, but it misses a lot of the nuances that are involved in AI because it's here to stay. It's here
Mhm.
to stay.
And it's probably gonna evolve even more,
It's
right?
going to evolve even more for good and ill. And so the question now, and this is something I'm working on, and Cindy and I are talking about, I'm still figuring out how to use it and how not to use it.
Mhm.
And Cindy is a purist. She believes that, it takes the creativity out of it and it is soulless. And I do not disagree with her. But I think that AI can be useful. It can be useful in like writing the dust jacket copy.
Mhm.
Make this with, give me some pizzazz here, or coming up with maybe suggested titles.
Mhm.
I mean, you can use AI to do that. I have started to well, no, let me back up. I don't write short stories because I suck at it. I know that for a fact because I tried getting short stories published before I started writing novels. And so somebody asked me to write a short story for an event to read. And so I went to AI and I typed in the parameters. I said, give me, write a short story, 5,000 words. This is the title. This is sort of what it's about. Um, do it. And it sucked. It spit out something. And, it sounded like it could have been a story, but by this time I've got experience writing stories and I know good from bad.
Mhm.
This was terrible.
Really?
And that cured me of any temptation to have AI do the writing for me. And
Mhm.
so I ended up crafting a short story that I was much happier with because it was coming from me.
Right.
I just did an interview recently with J.D. Barker. J.D. Barker is a novelist. He writes on his own, but he also co-authors with James Patterson, who is a mega best-selling thriller author. and JD uses AI to proofread and to, tighten up sentence structure and stuff like that. But and his insight was really helpful to me because he said AI will regurgitate whatever is out there. It learns by what's out there, and it can do it fast. But what it can't do is create something new, because when you create, you are creating something that is unique to you based on
Mhm.
your own personal experience, your own psychology, your psyche, your emotions. And AI can't reproduce that because
Right.
it doesn't know you. It
Yeah,
doesn't
your
know you
voice,
like
your true voice doesn't come through.
right. And so I will use AI to give me suggestions,
Mhm.
help me give me 5 suggestions on what could happen here. And I don't have to use any of them, but at least it's been a prompt. It's given me something that I can play with. It's been a research tool with some caveats because, you know, AI hallucinates too. So I'll often go, "Where'd you get that?" And it'll take me to the website. So it's been helpful to do some preliminary kind of research type things too. Um,
Are people writing just AI novels, or do they
yes. Oh my God.
and there's
Uh,
no vetting of it, like, they're just
None. Oh no, not at all. And and people are buying it. People are
wow.
buying it. Um and it's just, and it's schlock, but it's out there. And there's some things that are unresolved yet in the courts. David Baldacci and some other best-selling authors have sued, I don't know, ChatGPT. I don't know who they've sued, but because a lot of their novels are being fed into the AI system, and it's copyright infringement, or at least that's the allegation.
Wow.
Because in order to get their novels, you got to pay for them, and somehow they've gotten in. AI has been able to, somehow access best-selling authors' novels,
Uh-huh.
and has learned from copyrighted material. And so I think that, soon the screws will start, tightening.
Mhm.
And I'll say one more thing, and that is that already when you are trying to get published traditionally, publishers and agents will ask you to sign a form
Mhm.
uh, uh, promising that AI was not used in the writing of this novel. Now, has it been used in the creative stage of, getting ideas and doing research? Yeah, I use it for that, but I don't use it for the creative part, the writing part. And so it's evolving,
Mhm.
and it's here to stay. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I highly discourage, to the point of don't use it to write your novel. It
Mhm.
won't be good. It won't be you.
If someone wants to write a novel traditionally, what suggestions would you have? Or you said that everyone can really maybe become published. I think it's such hard writing is such hard work. For me, it's really hard if you wanna do a
Well,
good
you
job.
have high standards. You have very high standards.
Mhm.
And so if you want to get published traditionally, make it as good as you can make it.
Mhm.
That means going to writers' conferences, reading books about the process,
Mhm.
um, talking to writers and learning from them about their process and what they've learned along the way. Um, Hiring an editor.
Mhm.
There are 2 types. There's the developmental editor who will just look at the story. Does the story work? And then there's the deep dive copy editor who will look for typos and all the nitpicks. I do both of those things. But
Mhm.
for a rookie writer, a first timer, I encourage you to just hire me to do a developmental edit. It's not as expensive. And, I'll be able to tell you if this is going to work or not traditional.
Well, I can speak personally, you are a phenomenal editor. I mean,
Oh,
you
thank
edited
you.
my book proposal, and I was blown away. He's
Thank you.
really good. Everyone's
Thank
yeah,
you.
really.
I love you, man.
It's true, John. Very true. What and then I've also come across just writing nonfiction because I'm more into memoir or self-help. it seems that having a platform is maybe wasn't important back then, but it certainly is now. Can you
It
speak to
really
that?
is. Yeah, it is to have a platform is basically, people who know who you are. It
Mhm.
could be Facebook, it could be LinkedIn, it could be Instagram. It's more than your website. It's important to have a website because that's your cyber calling card. That's where people will check you out and
Yeah.
find out who you are. But
Mm.
a social media platform is dynamic. It's two-way, and so to have a presence is critical because those are the people who are most likely to buy your books, and it's a business. I've had people tell me, I don't really care if I sell a lot of novels. I just want to get a book out there. Well, you're never going to get an agent that way. That's a turnoff because they're in it to make money. And if
Right.
you don't care, you've just signaled that you don't care.
And that's
So
what
it's treated as a business.
right, that's what I thought when I changed thinking of it that way of, when dealing with rejection is that you have to think of it, this is a business for them. It's not just about you.
Exactly. It's entrepreneurial. And
Mhm.
that's fulfilling because I think the entrepreneur, and you're an entrepreneur in doing what you do. And I've become one since I left CNN in 2013, and it's stimulating because you are constantly looking for ways to improve yourself and to connect with others.
Mhm. Oh. What's the biggest mistake or mistakes that writers make?
Probably the biggest mistake, well, the biggest mistake is giving up.
Mhm.
Feeling like you suck and you have no business doing it. The whole imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
And the thing that surprises me is there are people who are very well established who have imposter syndrome. It is a human tendency to be self-critical to the point of giving up. And if you can get beyond that and accept the fact that there are people who are better than you and who aren't as good as you, you're in the middle somewhere, and resolve to keep trying, to keep getting better and not give up. That's job one. The other thing is more to craft, and that is rookie writers tend to stuff backstory into the very first pages. Instead, get the story started. The backstory can be sprinkled in because think of it. That's how we get to know people. We don't know their whole story when we meet them on the street. We are intrigued and we want
Mhm.
to know more. And that's what you want to do with the reader.
You wanna
Take
build it.
what let them get to know the character as the character is navigating their life.
Mhm. Um, what are you working on no oh, well, first, how long does it take you to write a book approximately?
Well, if you build procrastination in, it could take 4 years. If everything's firing on all cylinders, I can crank out a first draft in maybe 6 months, four to
Oh,
six months. 9 months. By 9 months, I've worked through. I've done the editing and I've made it better. And then by the time the second draft is done, then it's ready for beta readers, people who will because they're not close to it the way I am. So I would say that it could take a year from start to finish to when you're actually ready to start getting an agent.
okay. And how many hours are you writing a day?
You don't have to write 8 hours a day. I mean, 2 hours is good for me. If I can do 2 hours, there are times when, things are really cooking. But if you write just 1,000 words, you're gonna, that's a lot over time. And
Okay,
1,000 words is only about if double spaced, it's only about 5 pages.
okay. Well,
Not a
that's inspiring because I think when you look at it that way, it's doable.
But I would caution you against setting deadlines
Mhm.
because if you say, I've got to write 1,000 words a day, how do you feel about yourself when it's only 250 or 800?
That's gonna create writer's block, I believe. And
Exactly. Just, when you're because if you're thinking about your book, that's also writing.
right.
Ruminating is also writing.
Mhm.
But when you're actually doing it, 1,000 words, that's okay. 500 words, that's okay too.
what are you working on now?
Working on book 7 in the Lark Chadwick series. And I've also finished my memoir.
Wow.
The working title is Plot Twists, a Memoir on Writing and Living. It went
Oh,
through 7 drafts, probably
wow.
two dozen beta readers. My
When did you
wife,
start it? How long ago?
I started it in 2018,
Oh my goodness.
and it's now at a publisher they're deciding.
Oh,
And so I'm in the pitching process.
they're gonna say yes.
Thank you.
I'm certain. John, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, this has been great. I mean, I love talking to you, and I can tell that your questions are coming from a place of your own curiosity,
Yeah.
and so you're a fun person to talk to. You're, fascinating, and there's so much there, and there's so much in you that you have embedded into your life based on the lessons you've learned. And you're now in a position where you're sharing your own wisdom with others. And so I appreciate this opportunity to be not the first guest, but one of the first guests on your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I don't think I have anything more to share. I've talked a lot. So
Okay.
I should quit
I
putting
have
all on my head. Okay.
one last question this week.
Oh, okay. This is a very low budget operation here.
Yes, it is. Well, when I see you next time, will you sign Bluff
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Thank you. There's the book. Look at
at the
that.
John? Look,
Yeah.
second one in the series.
Thanks, Sarah. And you liked it, apparently.
I loved it. Yeah, as you can see, I read it a couple times.
Oh, my.
It's such a good book. It's great.
Thank you.
Really
Well,
got into it. And
I need,
I hiked an alternate Inca trail. I hiked the Salcatay Trail. So when she was in Machu Picchu, that resonated with me as well.
wow. Well, consider yourself invited to be a guest on my podcast.
Really? Oh, I'd be
Oh, yeah.
honored.
I'd love to do it. So
Really? Oh, thank
this
you.
way I get to ask you more questions.
Yeah.
Yay, definitely, yay.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Um, and tell us again how people can reach you.
Through
I'm
my
gonna put a
website.
link I will put a link in the comments below when this is published. And
Yeah, some people listen though, so they're not watching. So you get through to me through my website,
okay,
johndedakis.com, and I'll spell it again. John, D as in dog E, D as in dog A, KIS as in Sam.com.
okay, wonderful. And if you're enjoying this episode on a little bit of magic, I hope that you like, subscribe, share, and we'll be bringing it back. And maybe John, you'll be back again.
If that's up to you, ma'am.
That would be wonderful. I'd love to, especially when your memoir comes out and your next
Oh, yeah.
novel. Oh,
Thank you. Thank you.
thank
This
you.
has been fun.
It's been so much fun. I appreciate it. And cheers, everyone. Thank you. And we'll see you again. Okay. A little bit of magic.